Madam President, we're going to have a vote later this afternoon, and it's not an ordinary vote in the United States Senate. We're voting on what's called the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is the acknowledgement of the government's debt. It looks backwards and says, over a period of time since we last expanded the size of the debt, we've incurred more debt, and therefore we have to acknowledge that, to acknowledge the new debt ceiling in order to establish that the United States is going to pay that debt, which of course we want a reputation for paying just bills. And in this situation, these were bills for debts incurred during the Trump administration. It should be a rather routine thing. In fact, one might make the argument that the Senate and the House should not even be involved in this acknowledgement. It is simple accounting and should be announced to the American people. But for the time being, it is subject to a vote in the House and the Senate, and that's where the problems arise. Senator McConnell, the Republican leader from Kentucky, is hoping that the American public will not clearly understand the gravity and the importance of this vote. He has announced that he is going to boycott this vote, and not a single Republican will vote to acknowledge the true debt of the United States of America. I don't know if he will be able to keep his word, whether every Republican senator will march blindly behind him. They did once before under the American Rescue Plan, when Joe Biden proposed that we do the things necessary to bring this pandemic to an end and get America back on its feet. Not a single Republican would vote for it. We passed Donald Trump's promised cash payment of $1,400 for every family in America. It was in the American Rescue Plan. The Republicans all voted against it. We passed the money, billions of dollars, so that we could actually administer the COVID vaccine across America. We had discovered the vaccines, but of course there's a huge infrastructure to make sure that they are safely administered to American people. That was in the American Rescue Plan, and all the Republicans voted against it. There was also a provision in there to deal with helping businesses reopen their doors. Saturday night in Chicago, I spoke to a restaurateur who told me about problems he had faced and the debts he incurred, and he finally is getting back on his feet once and for all. The American Rescue Plan helped businesses just like that across America, and every Republican voted against it, every one of them. Not a single Republican senator or House member would support that effort. Thank goodness we had enough Democratic votes to get it done. But now we face the debt ceiling, and we're getting the same threats from the Republicans that they are going to boycott the vote, march out of the room, and refuse to acknowledge the debt of the United States. This debt ceiling is absolutely essential to pay for decisions that have already been made, as I mentioned. This is for debt incurred during the Trump administration. And lest you think that this fiscally conservative Donald Trump was a good Republican through his 4 years when it came to debt, think again. The greatest increase in America's national debt in any 4-year period in our history, 36% increase. Let me repeat, raising the debt ceiling has nothing to do with future spending. We're paying Donald Trump's bills. We're acknowledging what was done by the House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats, what was spent and now has to be repaid. This is about paying what we already owe, and it's also about averting an economic catastrophe. As a candidate, Donald Trump used to beg that he was, quote, king of debt. How about that, Mr. President? King of debt, what he says. Well, he proved it. His reckless spending as president with America's credit card added nearly $8 trillion to our national debt. $8 trillion. That is a third of the entire debt was incurred during the Trump administration. And now the Republicans, his party, refuse to acknowledge that debt and the fact that we have to pay it back. He racked up all that debt in 4 years. $2 trillion of that, incidentally, was spent on tax cuts for the richest people in America. Yes, that was the Trump plan, supported by the same Republicans who today are saying they won't even cast a vote to acknowledge that they did it. And it added to the deficit. 85% of the benefits of Trump tax cuts, supported by Senator McConnell and the Republicans, went exclusively to the top 10% of wage earners in America. The Senate passed those tax cuts all on their own through reconciliation. I will tell you this, I didn't vote for it. No Democrats voted for it. What we're doing today is paying the piper, acknowledging that this is a legitimate debt of this country. We can change policy going forward, but since we enacted those tax cuts 4 years ago, it's added to the national debt, and we acknowledge it today, and Senator McConnell and the Republicans refuse to acknowledge it. During Trump's one term in office, the national debt increased by almost 36%. 4 years, 36%. Our Republican colleagues voted to raise the federal debt ceiling once and to suspend it twice during Donald Trump. And the Democrats stood with them because we understood that this is just basic requirement 101 of constitutional government. We shared the responsibility, not because we agreed with his policies, we don't, but because we understood that defaulting on the national debt could cause real damage to America. What would the costs of defaulting on our debt be exactly? According to some economists, we would see an estimated $15 trillion in household wealth wiped out, 2.6 million American jobs lost, a 9% unemployment rate. Every last American would feel the pain. If it continued for any period of time, it would threaten retirement funds, Social Security checks, even job security. Mark Zandi, pretty well-respected Moody's economist, warns that a default on America's debt would trigger financial Armageddon, sending markets into free fall and threatening America's status as a world's reserve currency. All because the Republicans refused to acknowledge debt they voted for and created under a Republican President Donald Trump. Even toying with the notion of default would have severe consequences. Back in 2011, the House Republicans initially refused to raise the debt limit. America's credit rating was downgraded because of it. The result? Higher borrowing costs, billions more to the national debt, and confidence in America shaken globally. We'll find out very shortly whether every Republican is going to follow the dictates of Senator McConnell when it comes to defaulting on America's debt for the first time. And we'll also see what the reaction of that is going to be. This measure we're going to vote on in about 2 hours suspends the debt ceiling to prevent the first default of debt in our nation's history and keeps the government open. Just that basic. After what we have been through and what we are going through with the pandemic, how can the Republicans play with this deadly economic strategy? Without a continuing resolution, the federal government will shut down in less than 4 days. With the Delta variant still taking 2,000 American lives a day, this is no time to shut down the federal government. With victims of hurricanes and floods and wildfires desperate for help, this is not the time to close the doors of the agencies that can help them. With our economy still recovering, now is not the time to damage it intentionally for political reasons. Right now, our number one priority is keeping the nation's economy on a path to recovery, helping families through a difficult time. We need to come together and fund the government. That is our fundamental responsibility. We need to pay our bills on time. We need to provide financial relief to Americans who are battling disasters, whether they're in California or Oregon or Louisiana or Illinois or Hawaii. And we need to grow our economy for future generations, increasing funding for childcare, education, healthcare, and reducing the expenses that average working families face every single day. President Biden's Build Back Better plan is a prudent investment in our economic future. It includes the largest middle-class tax cut in history. Do you know what the Republicans call the largest middle-class tax cut in history? Socialism. Socialism. I heard Senator McConnell say that. They just want to pursue socialism. The largest tax cut for working families and children in America in history. Unlike President Trump's tax giveaway to the rich, which Senator McConnell voted for and now doesn't want to pay for, the Build Back Better plan won't add to the debt. We'll pay for it by asking these same wealthy individuals and corporations to pay their fair share. No one, this is a promise by President Biden to be held to, no one who makes $400,000 a year or less will pay more in taxes. He's been pretty clear on that, hasn't he? So this notion that we're going through some socialist tax and spend scheme here just isn't true. 7 months after he signed his tax cut into law, Donald Trump told the effervescent Sean Hannity of Fox News, and he bragged, "When this tax cut really kicks in, we'll start paying off that debt like it's water." Quote, Donald Trump. That was a con. Now the bills are coming due, and the Republicans are racing for the exits. It's time to stop this ruse and fraud on the American people. We need to pay our bills, act responsibly, and actually help working families. Madam President, I yield the floor and suggest the evidence of quorum.